The 12th of September, 1791. Gridlock on Prague streets. Horses jitter at flares and fireworks. Food is ferried in tumbrils for the coronation ball in the face of a hungry crowd. A 66-year-old Venetian steps stiffly from his coach into the lights of the Nostitz Theatre portico. As he passes through to the stalls, a view opens up to him straight out of his Venetian childhood. Drapes of Bohemian red linen, a double phalanx of mirrors, chandeliers, and trompe-l'oeil cornices and skies. Only days earlier, the Venetian, Giacomo Casanova, had attended there the premiere of Mozart's new work composed in honor of the newly crowned emperor. But he had preferred Don Giovanni and its catalogue of conquests. "Seen it," Casanova was said to have responded to an old friend. "I've practically lived it." As a child, Casanova had seen many similar spectacles. Indeed, the century into which he was born had been in many senses a Teatro del Mundo itself, a world in thrall to theatre. The family into which Giacomo Casanova was born on the 2nd of April 1725 was not merely untitled and poor, it was notorious. Casanova was the son of actors, or at least of an actress, Zanetta Farusi. The exact paternity of her first child was open to speculation, though Giacomo came to believe he was the son of the Venetian theatre owner Michele Grimani. Men, however, were to play only minor roles in Giacomo's early life. His father, or my mother's husband, as he tellingly referred to him, died when he was quite small. Zanetta, a small, fiery, and unconventionally beautiful comedienne, became a star of the Venetian comic stage, and was not averse to using all of her charms to support her family and her career, and she had good reason to do so. At 26 she was a widow, and the sole wage earner in an extended family of 8. The tiny house on the Calle della Commedia, where Zanetta lodged her family, was overshadowed by tall apartment houses, by the Palazzo Malipiero, and by the San Samuele Theatre, where she worked. Casanova was never far from the stage door. In Venice, then probably the most densely populated city in the world, love-making, snoring, arguing, and laughing were clearly audible across the small callés. Only the masks and covered gondolas, like floating double beds, created small oases of privacy. First memories are often revealing. Yet Casanova claimed to be able to recall nothing for the first 8 years of his life. His mother and father had assumed not only that he was mentally deficient, but that the sickly, abnormally self-absorbed boy would die young. The first memory that stuck was of a catastrophic nosebleed. His beloved grandmother, Marcia, put her faith in a folk medicine healer on the Venetian island of Murano. The witch, as Giacomo called her, performed an elaborate incantation, gave him numberless caresses, undressed him, and smeared unguents on his forehead. It made a deep impression on him. After the visit to the healer, the recurrent nosebleeds became less frequent. But medical opinion at the time had it that blood distempers such as Giacomo's were air-affected, and Venice was notoriously malodorous. Casanova's uncle insisted that he should be sent away to be educated. On his 9th birthday, Casanova left Venice for Padua with his mother. They sailed away in a borchiello, a sort of immense punt, for Padua, where Zanetta left him in a lice-infested hostel. Later, Casanova wrote, with the bitterness towards his mother that marked him all his life, "She had got rid of me." Abate Gozzi, a teacher, violinist, and priest, was 26 and living with his shoemaker parents when Giacomo Casanova came to Padua as his pupil. He was a doctor of law, with an eclectic library. Gozzi also had a personable younger sister, Bettina, the prettiest girl on our street, according to Casanova. Bettina was several years older than Giacomo and referred to him as my child. To begin with, he was her doll. She dressed his hair, making fun of his timidity.
Putting on the stockings, she said that my thighs were dirty, and at once began washing them without asking. I was ashamed to let her see me ashamed. Her curiosity aroused a voluptuous feeling in me which did not cease until it could not become greater. But with Bettina it was all over physically before it had begun, and Giacomo was left bewildered and distraught. Bettina was, wrote Casanova, the first who little by little kindled in my heart the first sparks of a feeling which later became my ruling passion. 2 years later, Bettina married a local shoemaker, but Casanova began the habit of a lifetime in remaining a close friend of the girl he called his first love. In 1776 he was at her deathbed. Casanova returned to his studies. His boast that he had graduated as a doctor of law at only 16 was long assumed to have been a lie, but Paduan records make clear that he graduated in 1741, having enrolled at the university there in 1737, aged 12. During his teens, Casanova was reluctantly apprenticed to an advocate in Venice, though he repeatedly told everyone that his vocation was medicine. His family was perhaps pushing him towards canon law and the greater respectability of the church. In 1740, Father Tosello, the parish priest of San Samuele, took Giacomo by gondola along the Grand Canal to the Patriarch of Venice in St. Mark's to be inducted in the first 4 minor holy orders, the first steps towards a church career. Giacomo's assumption of the title Abate made him conspicuous locally, as if he wasn't already. With his etiolated frame and mop of curls, he was a changed young man from the sickly child who had been taken away on the Borchiello 5 years earlier. Yet Casanova did not conform to ideals of sexual allure. He had a large, beaked nose and bulbous, heavily lidded eyes. But at 6'1" he was uncommonly tall, and he moved, it was said, like a dancer. Through Father Tosello, Casanova was introduced to his first aristocratic role model, Senator Malipiero, a sprightly 70-year-old who owned a palazzo by the Grand Canal. Casanova's position as a churchman gave him access to the salons of Venetian society, far above the expectations of an actress's son. He became a regular dinner guest at the lavish Palazzo Malipiero, less than 10 yards from his birthplace, where he was drawn into a dazzling new world of opportunity. He was handsome, a connoisseur of wine and an epicure. He possessed the eloquence of the Venetians and 20 mistresses, remarked Malipiero. Abate Casanova took at once to palazzo life and began to dress to suit his new backdrop. He wore pomade and curled his naturally wavy hair, but was warned that his manner and appearance were being noted around San Marco as less than appropriate to an aspiring churchman. When Casanova argued that other abates were seen around town in wigs and perfume, Tosello persuaded his grandmother to lend him the keys to the Cala della Commedia house. One night, while Casanova was asleep, he went in and cut off Casanova's fringe. It was a deliberate reining in of the young blade, who responded with adolescent fury, even threatening legal action against the priest. He was soothed only by Malipiero's gift of an appointment with one of Venice's most sought-after hairdressers, who repaired the damage with curling tongs. Then Casanova was issued with a challenge. As local signor, Malpiero had to suggest a preacher for the pulpit of San Samuele on the day after Christmas. He put forward Abate Casanova. Casanova was determined to say astonishing things. Daringly, he took as his text not a biblical verse, but one of the epistles of Horace. Casanova delivered it to some acclaim, and a collection plate that profited him nearly 50 zecchini, together with some love letters, all of which made me think seriously of becoming a preacher. But the pleasure was short-lived. Casanova was confident enough not to learn his second sermon by heart, and to drink at lunch. He entered the pulpit and, in the theatrical term, dried. There was, he wrote later, a low murmur from the restive audience, I can assure the reader, he continued, that I have never known whether I pretended to faint or fainted in good earnest. Nonetheless, he fell to the floor of the pulpit and was carried out to the sacristy. Humiliated, he packed his bags and completely renounced the profession of preaching. A churchman, however, for the time being, he remained. Casanova did not lose his virginity to either of the obvious candidates. Angela, Father Tosello's niece, or Lucia, a serving girl who intimated to him she would happily have obliged. Angela and Casanova first met when he was en route to Father Tosello's study. She was entirely at ease with the idea of accepting his advances as long as they tended towards marriage. This perfect dragon of virtue, though only 17 herself, insisted that he reject his career in the church for her. But Casanova wanted a torrid love affair in the Venetian style and would not contemplate marriage. He wanted to play the game of love as it was played around him, courtly, knowing, and freely available to clerics. In September 1741, when he was 17, Casanova found himself in the unexpected but entirely welcome position as the object of a determined seduction. Nannetta and Marta Savonan were distant relatives and bosom friends of Angela. Their aunt let some of her house on the Salidas San Samuele, keeping a fourth-floor room as a bedroom for her nieces, and on occasion Angela. It was Nannetta who hatched a plot, communicated to the Abate Casanova for him to befriend their aunt and arrange an invitation to visit the house. Once there, Nannetta would pretend to show him out towards the end of the evening, but would instead direct him to the fourth-floor room on a night when Angela was staying. On the appointed evening, however, only Nannetta and Marta appeared. They claimed they did not know where Angela was, and after 2 bottles of Cyprus wine, resolved to go to bed together, as friends. Then they all feigned sleep. They had their backs turned towards me, and we were in darkness. I began with the one towards whom I was turned, not knowing whether it was Nannetta or Marta. I set to work. But to crown my labours, it was necessary that she should join in them openly and undeniably, and nature finally forced her to do so. I turned the other way to do the same thing with her sister. She helped me to triumph. Then, throwing off the mask of affected sleep, she clasped me in her arms and pressed her mouth on mine. This love, which was the first of my life, taught me almost nothing of the ways of the world, for it was perfectly happy, not tarnished by the slightest self-interest. Nannetta married shortly after, while Marta entered a convent and went to some lengths to persuade some of her young charges to ignore the attentions of one Giacomo Casanova. Her last words to Casanova were that she would pray that he would repent his libidinous ways. But the young Abate had other plans.